Everyone knows that the English water system is completely broken, but in this video we're focusing on the most important way in which we're all being ripped off, and this image tells the story. So welcome to Bonkers Economics. Let's start straight with the image, and what it shows are two very simple numbers. The blue area shows the amount of money that the government received when the water industry was sold to private investors in 1989. And that number is £3.6 billion. Although in the image it actually shows as £6.5 billion because I've allowed for inflation. These are 2019 prices. And then the big green area here, this enormous grey area here, that is the amount of money that the water companies have paid to their investors by way of dividends in the same period, from 1989 to 2019. And as you can say, it's much, much bigger. It's actually about £57 billion. And if we were looking at that number now in 2025, it would be well over £70 billion, almost £80 billion by some calculations. So it's a huge number. So what does that mean? Well, the companies have had their money back over that period between 10 and 20 times, depending on how you calculate it. So that's been a terrible investment from Britain's point of view. We got 3.6 billion as a payout, and we paid out 10 or 20 times that amount, depending on how you factor in inflation. So first of all, to make sense of this, we just need to understand what we mean by investment. So normally an investment is where someone puts up some money to buy something and somebody else wants to make use of that thing, and they pay the person who owns the thing for the use of it. So for example, a company might put up money to build a windmill, to build a wind turbine to generate electricity, and we as customers ultimately would pay them for the electricity, including an amount to cover a return on the investment they've made. And that's fairly straightforward. Now, in this case, the situation is rather different because the water companies have not put up any money to cover the investment in the water industry. The only money the water companies have put into the industry is more or less that 3.6 billion that they put in, or that was put in at the beginning. Pretty much no money at all has been put in by the companies of their own in that time. And yet, despite that, investment has been made. Well over £120 billion has been invested in the water industry in the last 30 years. That's money to fix broken pipes and sewage outflows, to put in new plant and equipment. It's a lot of money that's gone into the system. Although nowhere near enough, as we know, it's still a substantial sum. So where has that come from? Well, the answer is it's come straight out of our water bills. If you think about water, it's not something that the companies have to make. It comes out of the sky or it comes out of the ground. It's not a product they have to manufacture. All they have to do is take it from where it arrives to where we want to consume it. So most of the money we pay for our water goes to pay the cost of maintaining the infrastructure, the reservoirs, the sewage plants, the treatment plants, the pipes, and all that sort of thing. So that's where the money comes from. It comes from us. And so how come the water companies are able to pay themselves this enormous return? Well, that's where it gets a bit interesting. Because although the money has come straight from us, the regulator and the government treat this money as belonging to the water companies. So what they say is, well, look, the water companies charge you or charge us. We, the bill payers, we pay the water companies. The water companies then spend that money on infrastructure, reservoirs and sewage plants and leaking pipes and that sort of thing. And so it's their money they're spending because they've charged us. They've taken it from us and they've spent it, so it's their money and not ours. So it's treated as belonging to them, even though it came straight out of our pockets. And that means it's treated as being their investment and not our investment. And that means they can justify paying this enormous return. So suddenly this huge dividend they've paid themselves, that's not a return on 3.6 billion or 6.5 billion, depending on how you calculate it. This enormous 57 billion return, which as I say is now probably more like 70 or 80 billion, that is a return on an investment of 120 or 130 billion over 30 years, which is still a lot, but it's a little bit more reasonable. So that's how it works. It's an absolute scandal. Our money is treated as their money. We pay for it twice because we put up the money and then they get a return on that money, which we also pay for. And this explains something else too, which is why the government is going on about the fact that it would cost £100 billion to renationalise the water companies. Because that £100 billion they're talking about, well, that's the 120 billion or so that we've invested. They're saying, look, the water companies invested that money, even though we, the bill payers, paid for it. And so it's their money, so we have to pay them back that 100 or 120 billion pounds if we're going to renationalise the companies. Well, that's complete nonsense. That was our money in the first place. If the government wants to renationalise the water companies, there's no way it has to pay back the money that we as bill payers have put in over all those years. It just doesn't make sense. However, it's probably realistic to assume that the government is not going to renationalise the water companies because that's its mindset. This is where it's coming from. So what can we do? What can we do going forward to make sure the situation doesn't get any worse? Well, the answer to that lies in the fact that the government is now talking about the water companies having to invest another £100 billion over the next 10 years or so in order to get the system anywhere near up to scratch and to stop the many, many problems that we currently have. So what we can say, I think, at this point, and it's really important that we do say this, is look, the government's got to ring fence that money. If we're going to be asked as bill payers to put up another £100 billion over 10 years, if we're going to pay for that, then we need to own that. The government needs to ring fence that money and say, right, that doesn't belong to the water companies. They can't pay themselves a return on that investment because it wasn't their investment in the first place. That must belong to the bill payers. And it must be ring fenced, as I say, and it must be placed in a fund which is not accessible by the water companies when they're calculating their returns on capital and their profits, because it wasn't their capital investment in the first place. Because think what will happen if the water companies are allowed to invest this additional £100 billion out of our water bills and it's not ring fenced. It's not treated as belonging to us, but it's treated as belonging to the water companies. Well, in that situation, this drawing, which is already somewhat out of date, will just go massively out of date because this blue section here won't get any bigger. That's still the amount of money that the companies will have put in. But this green section will get much, much bigger. It'll burst out of this frame. I'll need a much bigger sheet of paper because it will be representing a return on £220 billion and not the £120 billion that is currently said to have been invested. And that just means we'll be paying more and more and more because we'll be paying that £100 billion out of our bills and we'll be paying the water companies a return on their investment, which will get even bigger. And that's just not acceptable. It makes absolutely no sense. And it shows why this crazy water privatisation should never have happened in the first place. It never made any sense. But at least we can get on top of it now. At least we can insist to the government that they ring fence that money we're about to put in. Because if they don't, the situation will just get catastrophically worse. Our bills will just go up more and more and more, or the water system won't get fixed. And that would be the worst outcome of all. So there you have it. That's the biggest and most important way in which we're being ripped off, frankly, by the water companies and the water privatisation at the moment. It's not the only issue by any means around the water companies. There's a lot more going on that we need to talk about, and I've got another video in this series called What is the Real Reason Why the Government Won't Renationalise the Water Industry? And that goes into the whole subject in much more depth, so do catch that if you can. In the meantime, thanks very much for watching. If you've enjoyed the video, do please press the like button because that really helps, and also click on subscribe if you'd like to see more videos in the Bonkers Economics series. And do please tell your friends and family, anyone you think might be interested. And finally, do please check out the website, which is bonkerseconomics.net, because there you will find all the numbers behind the images, all the images in the series. You'll find where those numbers come from. You'll find much more background information and a good deal else besides. Thanks very much.